This animated blueprint shows the Swedish AK-5. It's a masterpiece of subarctic engineering, but it's equally infamous for two bizarre traits: punching its users in the mouth and shooting wood. To understand why it does either of those things, we have to look back at the 1970s. Sweden's military had a logistical problem. They were fielding heavy 7.62mm battle rifles alongside obsolete World War II era Mausers. They desperately needed to move to a unified modern 5.56mm platform. They ran a massive infantry trial to find a replacement. The troops had a clear favorite, the FFV-890C. It was a rugged milled steel clone of an Israeli Galil. It performed flawlessly in the ice-cold conditions, but the government, they rejected it. Real steel is expensive and slow to produce. Sweden already owned the industrial tooling for stamped metal, so they opted for a cheaper stamped metal alternative, the Belgian FN FNC. Sweden essentially bet its national defense on a budget-friendly Belgian compromise. The problem was a Central European rifle wasn't built to survive the extreme cold of the Arctic Circle. Swedish engineers had to immediately tear the gun apart and rebuild it. In the Swedish theater, the baseline temperature routinely plummets to -30°C. At that temperature, exposed skin freezes to metal, meaning soldiers have to wear massive, heavily insulated Arctic mittens. You cannot fit a gloved hand inside a standard trigger guard, and you certainly can't pinch a tiny charging handle with it. Engineers enlarged the trigger guard so the gloved finger could reach the trigger. They thickened the handguard to insulate the user's hands from freezing steel, and they hooked the charging handle outward so it could be violently racked with the palm of a hand. The cold was also a fatal threat to the gun's internal mechanics. By tearing out the delicate mechanics and supersizing the ergonomics, they completely customized the standard European design for frozen insulation. Yet, the cold was only the first threat to the rifle. The second came from the military's own budget. To save money during training exercises, the Swedish military utilizes blank ammunition made with wooden projectiles. Firing solid wood out of a rifle is obviously dangerous, so they attach a special blank firing adapter to the muzzle. When the gun fires, this device pulverizes the wooden bullet, smashing it into fine sawdust before it can leave the barrel. This animated diagram shows the chemical disaster this causes inside the gun. Some of that sawdust goes back into the operating system. There, it mixes with hot carbon, fouling and gun oil, baking into a thick, concrete-like paste that easily blocks the gas piston. To counter this, the military forced an obsessive, hyper-vigilant cleaning culture to its conscripts. Scraping baked wood pulp out of the gas tube became an inescapable daily ritual in the field used to keep the rifle cycling. The modified gun also has a specified physical quirk, a unique recoil profile that caused the muzzle to bounce sharply. During high mobility drills or when slung across the chest, that heavy steel muzzle would frequently swing up and smash conscripts right in the teeth. The military had to invent a special hard rubber muzzle cap just to protect soldiers' smiles and conveniently block snow from packing into the barrel. Human factors and budget quirks were proving to be just as demanding on the rifle as the Arctic environment. Fast forward to the 2000s, the Cold War ended, the Swedish deployment shifted away from the snow. Peacekeeping missions pushed their troops into the fine alkaline dust of Afghanistan and the extreme heat of Mali. To survive these new environments, the military initiated the AK-5C modernization program. The goal was to adapt the rifle to handle desert grit and integrate modern tactical optics. Looking at the blueprint again, you see the structural upgrades. They chopped the barrel for maneuverability and bolted the Picatinny rails to the handguard. They locked an aim point sight into the new rail and swapped out the old metal boxes for a translucent plastic magazine. A weapon originally retrofitted for sub-Arctic defense successfully mutated into a highly reliable, globally deployable modular platform. The resulting AK-5C was almost universally beloved by the troops. It was rugged and dependable, but functionally it was maxed out. 4 decades of physical additions, thicker handguards, rails and optics accumulated into a fatal flaw. The loaded weight of the rifle swelled to a massive 4.5 kilos or nearly 10 pounds. For a modern infantry weapon carried on long patrols, that is simply too heavy. The platform had reached its absolute physical limit. There was nothing left to cut and nowhere left to upgrade. Sweden is now retiring the AK-5. They are teaming up with Finland to adopt a brand new AR-15 based platform manufactured by Sako, designated the AK-24. Looking back, the AK-5 was never supposed to be a legend. What started as a budget-friendly runner-up, an economic compromise handed to an army that clearly wanted something else. But clever, highly specific sub-Arctic engineering bridged the gap between what the government could afford and what the environment demanded. As the AK-5 moves into storage, its 40 years of service illustrate that environmental specialization and impressive Swedish engineering are what allowed a weapon to remain relevant across generations. But does that legacy carry over to its successor?